morning, everyone, and welcome to the beautiful capital of Stockholm and to this year's Stockholm Internet Forum. The first forum in real life, and honestly, I have to tell you, this is my personal opinion. It's always good with digital meetings, but it's better to meet in real life. So I'm glad to see you all here. Welcome to Stockholm. My name is Karin Jämtin. I'm Director General of Swedish SIDA, and I'm very happy to see you all, welcome you all, and I'm looking forward to 2 intense days. This is the 8th edition of Stockholm Internet Forum. For some of you, it's the first forum you're participating in. For some of you, it's very much not the first forum, but maybe the 8th. Welcome no matter what. All of you represent key partners and interlocutors of ours. Key partners in the fields of digitalization, information, communication technologies, human rights online, and freedom of speech and expression. Stockholm Internet Forum was first convened in 2012. The rationale was already at the time that human rights apply online the way they do offline. All of you in this room works so that every individual, no matter where, in all corners of the globe, no matter where, so that every individual can access and enjoy human rights offline as well as online. And this can only be achieved when digitalization is rights-based. CIF offers a platform to explore the protection of human rights and strengthening of digital safety and security. This requires joint efforts. It requires support to normative and policy development, technical solutions, and, of course, implementation on the ground. Digitalization and data management is changing our world as we speak, or rather, as we meet this morning. Now it includes emerging tech and artificial intelligence, AI. This can also lead to widening digital gaps between those with and without digital access. It can also lead to an overdependence on digital structures and tools that leaves any of us vulnerable, and especially when crises strike. Our dialogue with you, all our partners, during the past couple of years, when we discussed issues related to many different kinds, but many of you, when we discussed with you, described different types of crises: armed conflict and unrest, natural and man-made disasters, and of course, challenges during the COVID pandemic. In many places of the world, is still a lingering challenge, and it was indeed the overall theme of CIF 21. This year's theme, the role of internet and ICT during crisis, conflicts, and disasters. This year's theme acknowledges that there are opportunities, but also immense challenges related to the use of internet and ICTs during these troublesome situations. Needless to say, maybe, technology may become a double-edged sword. But new and innovative solutions make it possible for vulnerable people affected by different kinds of crises to cope in different ways. It gives people a possibility to keep in touch with loved ones, family, and friends. It gives a possibility to access education, to access work, to transfer money, to get organized, to monitor, and to report human rights violations. There are so many other possibilities that are being possible by digital solutions and technical solutions, but there are also many negative sides, and we'll certainly get back to that. In the coming days, we will all examine 3 different angles during parallel sessions: tech infrastructures and systems in times of crisis, information, data and media in crisis, conflicts and disasters, and normative frameworks needed to ensure rights and to uphold responsibility in difficult times. I look forward to interesting parallel seminars. Before introducing our first guest on the stage, I would like to note, finally, that many of you come, or who are joining us today, this year's CIF, come from very difficult contexts. In my years as Director General of SIDA, I've had the privilege to travel to many of the countries around the globe. Different countries, different contexts, different challenges. I've met boys, girls, men, women, affected by all different sorts of crises. I know that each and every one who is a person having lived in or just come out of a crisis bear your own struggle, your own memories, your own stories. I would like to ask you all to be respectful of everyone else's reality. Make sure to listen, to learn, and do not judge. We engage with and support and work with you because we believe, and rather we know, that you can make change for the better in your respective area and in your respective field. It will be 2 exciting days. I'm looking forward to these days. But now, first of all, I'm looking forward to the first guest on the scene. Rami Essam, please welcome on the stage. You became known worldwide for your performance in the Tahrir Square. Thank you, sorry. In the Tahrir Square in Cairo during the Arab Spring, the Egyptian Revolution of 2011. Some even called you the voice of the Egyptian Revolution. Before you sing, or whatever you will do on the stage, I think you will sing, I would like to give you a question. You heard the message, you know the theme of this year's Internet Forum. What is your message to the conference in spoken words before you sing?
Okay, thanks for having me here first. And when I was asked to join today and I was asked to talk about the role of internet in crisis and conflict, I thought that this is a very big question because internet is taking part of everything in our life today. It's in communication, education, in news, in campaigning, in marketing, in art, and in the same time, you can find also there dictatorship, false news, propaganda, and oppression. I am an artist that was taking part in the Arab Spring, the spring in the MENA region, where the internet was essential and extremely important for triggering all the revolutions there. Like, for example, in Egypt, the revolution started from a Facebook event, followed by a trigger from the biggest mistake the regime did when they cut off the internet, which led to the people to go to the streets. There was no other chance. And then, after that, the internet role changed so much, and I keep asking myself, is the internet today serving the people and democracy more, or serving dictatorship? And as soon as the regimes understood that dictatorship in real life is not enough, and they have to control the internet as well, that led to the digital dictatorship, criminalizing posts, arresting people for opinion and art sharing online, oppression, hacking, manipulating campaigns, and manipulating the people's voice on the internet. And when we all are on the internet, we think that we have the platform. But what we have to think more about is how to have more resources to the people's side. Because the regime have a lot of resources for their oppression machine. I think what we can do is investing more resources in the civil society and free media, and regulation to platforms not to ever allow any repression on their platforms or threatening, education to guarantee raising awareness for the next generation to be able to use the internet safely and smart, to be able to make change and reach democracy. And of course, all of this won't happen without making sure that internet is accessible to everyone. One important thing is that what we do on the internet must turn to action in real life, or then internet can cause harm to any movement more than good. I believe that the good people are smarter and more powerful than corrupted regimes. But we just need to focus and make sure that we can provide them with the right resource, and then people can have the power. I will sing now.
Good people are smarter than corrupted regimes. Thank you, Rami Essam. The stage is yours, please.
This song is called A Letter to the UN Security Council. And it talks about people who didn't have the chance for proper education, so they didn't know how to write or read, but they still wanted to send some letters to people in charge in the Security Council of the UN. The letter says, "Hey dear, I know you're busy. And by the way, this is not the first letter I'm sending, but I hope this one will find you and you will read it one day. I just want you to know that I don't understand you when you talk on behalf of me on TV. And I want you to be sure that you don't know anything about my life and my needs. And yes, maybe I don't know how to write freedom, but I carry my own freedom. And my silence doesn't mean that I'm weak. And one day, I can go out and take my rights." أرجو أن تصلك كلماتي رغم مشاغلك يا مجلس أمن الأمم المتحدة. ليست هذه أولى رسالتي. أرجو أن تصلك كلماتي رغم مشاغلك يا مجلس أمن الأمم المتحدة. ليست هذه أولى رسالتي. هانذا الإنسان الدامي سن الجهل سيوف الحكام على صمتي ومن الظلمة خلق الظلم ونخاسي. أصبحت بلا علم أتبع وسواسي. أصبحت عدوا لصديقي فأنا لا أعرف سوءاتي. أصبحت غريبا في طريقي غيري يقرأ لي بصلاتي يختار لجهلي وجهاتي. يا مولاي يا مولاي أمين المجلس والأمناء جميعا في كل أمانات خيانة أحلامي. يا مولاي أمين المجلس والأمناء جميعا، في كل أمانات خيانة أحلامي. قد لا أفهم كل الكلمات بتلفازي، لكن أعرف أن هوى السجن ثقيل. قد لا أعرف أن أكتب كلمة حرية، لكني أحمل معناها. فاعلم أن اليوم سيمضي، غدا قد ينفلت زمامي. يا مولاي فلتحضرني، يا مولاي فلتحضرني، يا مولاي فلتحضرني.
Rami, thank you very much. Brilliant voice, important message to say the least. Rami, you're a participator and an artist during these 2 days, so thank you very much for being here. Thank you. And now to the next speaker. Cecilia, where are you? Welcome. It's the Swedish ambassador for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. The Minister of Foreign Affairs has had to take off, I think. We're chairpersons of the EU and a lot of things on the agenda. We're very glad that you are here. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Director General Karin, and what a start. Thank you, Rami Essam. I think we are here to get energized. I already feel very much energized. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is my honor on behalf of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Minister Tobias Billström personally to wish you a very warm welcome to Stockholm. For me, it is a great honor to be here and to start off the conversation of the 2023 Stockholm Internet Forum. And we in the Foreign Ministry, we really hope that the next few days you will be enabled to have fruitful discussions, form new partnerships, and be inspired and energized. I'm very proud that Sweden provides the important platform that the CIF has really become, and that it also provides an opportunity to mobilize for future actions. I'm glad, for example, that the UN Tech Envoy will be here today, and that you will have sessions on both internet shutdowns and how tech companies protect users and uphold human rights. This year's theme, the role of the internet and ICTs during crisis, conflict, and disasters, is very timely, to say the least. Today, digital technologies offer unprecedented opportunities and challenges. They can be used as vehicles for positive transformation or change. But if misused, they can be instrumental in fueling divisions, insecurity, and mistrust. The internet, dear friends, must be free, secure, and open for all. As Karin Jämtin said, there can be no doubt that human rights apply online as well as offline, including the rights of freedom of expression, assembly, and privacy. The internet and digital technologies enable us to communicate, to access information, to engage in democratic processes, and to enjoy our human rights. Dear friends, we are living in a new era, an era which is not least marked by Russia's unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In this brutal war of aggression, internet access, telecommunications, and information play a crucial role. Thanks to Ukraine's impressive digitalization, internally displaced persons can apply for emergency state support online. Civilians suffering missile attacks are alerted when shelter must be sought and can check on their loved ones after the blasts. Digitalization and modern technologies have been decisive for Ukraine's resilience and ability to fight back against the Russian aggression, and also imperative in protecting the most vulnerable. This new era is also one in which we see a global trend of democracy in decline, with more complex conflict dynamics, as well as climate-related disasters and challenges. All over the world, we see space for civil society and democracy shrinking. Human rights and democracy defenders, journalists, and other media workers are being intimidated, harassed, and subjected to violence for voicing undesired information and opinions. Women and girls are disproportionately at risk and often suffer sexual and gender-based violence and harassment. These developments are as true online as offline. This makes an open, free, and secure internet increasingly important, not least as a key arena for the work of human rights and democracy defenders. Needless to say, the internet has also become a key arena for violations and human rights abuses, as authoritarian states are increasing their surveillance, applying targeted censorship, and ultimately completely shutting down the internet in order to silence opponents and keep their grasp on power. Clearly, digital transformation and the expansion of the digital ecosystem come with both challenges and opportunities. We must consider both increased security risks, not least in developing countries, and the need for strengthening our resilience and cybersecurity posture. The role of a safe, secure, and rights-respecting online environment is key to achieving our shared sustainable development goals. The international community should explore practical ways to mainstream cybersecurity capacity building into broader digital development efforts and work toward agreeing on a common set of goals and activities to that end. Ladies and gentlemen, in times of conflict and crises, the internet and ICTs can play a crucial role in connecting people and providing invaluable information and services. They can also serve as a vehicle for mobilization and as a tool for documenting violations and human rights abuses. The role of the internet and social media platforms in different situations, including the protests in Iran, cannot be underestimated. I would also like to emphasize the importance of multi-stakeholder cooperation. No one can govern the internet alone. States, civil society, and companies must work together in developing the framework, content, and common standards of the internet. States, because they must ensure respect for and fulfill human rights obligations online. Companies, because they are instrumental in maintaining the democratic space and must also respect human rights. And civil society, because they, you, play an important role as a watchdog, monitoring potential violations and abuses of human rights. Together with Rwanda, Sweden, through our UN ambassador, Anna-Karin Eneström, we have been entrusted as co-facilitators of the UN Global Digital Compact. This is a first-of-its-kind global framework to lay out principles for digital cooperation, shaped not only by states, but also by the multi-stakeholder community. Sweden is a proud member of the Freedom Online Coalition, which is one of the most important examples of multi-stakeholder cooperation, working for internet freedom and human rights online. Let me also stress the importance of transatlantic cooperation in the field of digitalization, transparency, and human rights. Right now, as we speak, Sweden is hosting the 4th meeting of the Trade and Technology Council between the US and the European Union in Luleå in northern Sweden, where these particular issues are among those being discussed. To conclude, dear friends, in this new era, the importance of a free, open, and secure internet cannot be underestimated, an internet where human rights are respected. Thus, our focus on digital issues will continue. You can count on Sweden to be an active voice in this field in all relevant fora, including the European Union and the United Nations. Our work for an internet that is free and open for all, even during crisis, conflict, and disasters, will continue unabated. So I hope that your discussions will be very fruitful and rewarding. I hope that you will also find some time to explore our beautiful city. You can at least sometime look through the windows and enjoy the beauty and get some inspiration from what you see. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ambassador. An important
Thank you.
message. Thank
Thank
you. And I would just like to underline the importance of recognizing that women and non-binary persons are actually having a more difficult time than men online. And that's also an important priority for Sweden. Thank you for underscoring that as well. Thank you, Ambassador. Now we're turning to another. It's a recorded message. Sweden is currently holding the presidency of the Council of the European Union. I'm therefore very happy and delighted to move over to this message from the EU Special Representative on Human Rights, Mr. Eamon Gilmore. The tasks of the Special Representative for Human Rights in the EU are to enhance the effectiveness and visibility of EU human rights policy. He has the responsibility to guide the implementation of the EU's Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy. This was adopted by the 27 EU member states in November 2020. Please roll the message.
It is my great pleasure to address the Stockholm Internet Forum. I have visited Sweden twice earlier this year, and I would have been honoured to be in Stockholm also today and engage with you in person on digital issues. Unfortunately, I could not join you due to my other commitments. I want to thank the organisers, the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, for their invitation and the possibility to address the forum with this pre-recorded message. I have been working now as the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights since early 2019. There have been few issues of such wide-ranging prominence and impact as the interplay between new digital technologies and human rights. The internet and digital technologies have opened up new avenues for the realization of human rights. At the same time, new technologies and cyberspace have become powerful, malign tools of authoritarian states and unscrupulous individuals and corporations. The European Union has recognized that new technologies hold both promises and threats for human rights. Harnessing opportunities and addressing challenges of new technologies is one of the 5 overarching priorities of the EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy 2020 to 2024. We have recognised it through our legislation with significant global impact, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, or the Artificial Intelligence Act, currently in the legislative process. We have recognised it through our emergency support for human rights defenders at risk in cyberspace, through our strong advocacy for global digital rules which are human-centric and rooted in human rights. Today, there is a wide recognition that the same rights that people have offline must also be protected online. This very forum was born in 2012 to reaffirm and promote this basic but wide-ranging tenet. And Sweden, at the UN Human Rights Council, played a major role in acknowledging the applicability of human rights in cyberspace. Unfortunately, the current state of human rights in the world is precarious. Democracy has been backsliding and human rights have been under increased attack. Authoritarianism is not only on the rise offline but also online. We must continue defending human rights online as well as the internet as a powerful enabler of these rights. We must continue defending an internet which is open, unfragmented, free, safe and secure for everyone. The theme of this forum is very timely. We have seen an avalanche of crises in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Myanmar and Sudan, to name a few. With climate change, natural disasters have been on the rise too and have exacerbated the humanitarian needs. New technologies play a very important role in preventing or addressing crises and their humanitarian ramifications. In Ukraine, digital technologies are helping with the documentation of war crimes and other violations of international humanitarian law, which are being committed by Russian invaders. With the Kremlin's war against Ukraine, we have seen an unprecedented mobilization for international criminal justice and support for the International Criminal Court. This Ukraine momentum for accountability should be seized for our action against impunity worldwide. New technologies have an enormous potential to boost these global efforts. In the world of connectivity and digital technologies, it is increasingly harder to get away with atrocities and war crimes. The face of international criminal justice has been turning digital. The EU, as the world's leading humanitarian donor, has been looking into innovative digital solutions for helping people affected by crises. In fact, we have now largely moved past the era of advocating the use of digital tools. They are now increasingly deployed on our humanitarian action. The European Union, DG ECHO, is financing and our partners are actively utilising digital technologies. These include using drones for mapping and delivering activities, use of artificial intelligence to power early warning and predictive models, supporting information management and decentralized digital transactions with blockchain, advancing the use of digital and biometric identities to ensure access to aid or sourcing of equipment and parts such as highly quality prosthetic devices in remote or conflict areas through 3D printing. In Bangladesh, for example, the EU has funded a project aimed at improving flood forecast via digital tools. It includes inundation mapping by drones and the development of a digital information board whereby real-time flooding forecasting data and info are shared at district, sub-district and union level and directly with the government flood forecasting and warning centre, and people on the ground receive mobile, voice, SMS containing early flood information. Today's innovative and pilot digital tools will become mainstream solutions of tomorrow. We need to share experiences from the use of new technologies that can make our assistance in crises more efficient, more targeted, cost-effective, and more environmentally friendly, while considering the opportunities as well as the risks. I'm convinced that your discussions at the Stockholm Internet Forum will help disseminating many smart solutions. I wish you many fruitful sessions, and I am looking forward to studying the outcome of your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Looking forward to receiving you in Stockholm next time, maybe, Imon. Now to the panel, and I would like to invite the three panelists at the same time to the scene, and maybe you could take the 3 seats in the middle here. Irene Khan, you serve as the UN Special Rapporteur on promotion and protection of the right to freedom of opinion and expression. You have been doing so since 2020. And from what I hear, and if it's true, we are delighted that your mandate has been renewed for another term. Yes, you're nodding. Thank you. I'm very glad. You have especially, or you have championed all of the rights, but championed the rights of women and girls throughout your career and also now. Thank you. Please welcome to the scene on stage. Tai Tai Ong, warmly welcome also to you. You are the lead curator of Myanmar Internet Project and are one of Myanmar's pioneers in the area of digital rights. You founded an organization in 2011 in Myanmar to focus on ICT for development and peace, internet freedom and digital rights. Welcome and thank you very much for being here. And last, but very much not least, Mr. Philip Stoll, warmly welcome to SIF. You're a senior tech diplomacy delegate, very nice title to have, at the International Committee of the Red Cross. You have also focused on ethical and principled use of technology by humanitarian aid, people working in the humanitarian aid sector. In the past 20 years, you have worked in Sierra Leone, Israel and the occupied territories, India, and most recently, responding to the misinformation campaigns against ICRC in Ukraine. Welcome to Stockholm and to SIF. Irene, I'll start with you. The floor is yours for your introductory remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karin. I would like to begin by sharing with you and with others in the room the findings of a report that I recently wrote on armed conflict and freedom of expression. And I think those findings would apply also to other kinds of crisis. And one of the major, in fact, the major finding is that the information environment today has become a dangerous theater of war. States, armed groups, and other kinds of non-state actors, enabled by digital technology and social media, are weaponizing information to sow confusion, feed hate, and incite violence. Information, of course, has long been manipulated by states and others, we know that. But what is new and deeply worrying today is the scale, speed, and spread of that information, and the way in which it is targeting civilians and also discrediting human rights defenders, journalists, humanitarian workers. So during armed conflict or any other crisis, people are at their most vulnerable and great need of accurate information. And it's precisely at that point that we see this attack on information. They're being hit with false or manipulated information, with internet shutdowns, slowdowns, information blackouts, and other restrictions on information. When families can't communicate, when people can't access reliable information for their own safety or to find out where the services are, they are unable to assess the risks to their security and safety and to make decisions. And very often in those crises, of course, minorities, women, marginalized groups, refugees, migrants, displaced persons are the first to be attacked. And disinformation, propaganda and hate speech are not only a factor during conflict or uprisings, it's actually a factor that causes the conflict. It feeds into the conflict and uprising. It incites, it spreads in a way across the entire cycle of tension and unrest. And it deepens social divisions, polarizes communities, and dehumanizes certain groups, which then makes it easier to commit the atrocities and also makes it much more difficult to start the peace process going. It continues post-conflict as well, and it's important to understand that whole cycle, the way in which it's affecting people, but also society. And it creates, and most importantly, of course, it creates distrust, public distrust in the integrity of information. And when people can't trust the sources of information, it's impossible to communicate and build a shared understanding. So that was the first point. My second point is that the game changer here is actually digital technology and social media. In Ethiopia, for example, an estimated 70% of disinformation has been spread by social media. Of course, we know how technology works there, so I won't mention it. But I do want to underline again something that was mentioned earlier, the dual role that social media platforms play. On the one hand, they provide a vital means of communication during times of crisis, and on the other, they are also the channel by which hate speech, disinformation, propaganda spreads. We have seen, for example, during the war in Ukraine, what has happened. And what's interesting in the war in Ukraine is that we've seen social media companies reacting to that to address the situation there. And some companies based in the US have very prominently made announcements of what kind of crisis response system they're putting in place. And my question to them is, are you doing the same for other conflicts around the world? So even where efforts have been made by these companies, of course, they're not looking at the deeper problems of their own business models. They're not, at least they're not being transparent enough, and so I suspect they're not actually doing so, is to carry out the proper human rights due diligence, to introduce human rights policies, standards into their policies. There is still inadequate, inconsistent content moderation. They're failing to demonetize disinformation, misinformation during a crisis. I would like to actually make one point as well that we sometimes forget in the digital age, that even today, most people in the world in crisis situations are relying on traditional media, on local radio, on television, on newsprint. And there, of course, we know that there are serious problems too. And just think of Serbia right now. It's actually television that's spreading the hate speech there. My third point is about the role of the states. They are the ultimate duty bearers. Unfortunately, many of them, as part of their strategy to contain disinformation, is actually doing more harm to freedom of expression by restricting it beyond what international law allows. But even more dangerously, many states themselves are sources of disinformation, hate speech, and propaganda. And state-created disinformation is the most toxic version, the most potent version that there can be, because, of course, the state has the resources, the state has the reach, and most importantly of all, the state can shut down any alternative sources of information. So that's very dangerous, and that continues. Let me finally say that, and also I should add, that technology has made it possible for state-led disinformation now to spread across borders from very distant sources. And yet human rights are still territorial. International humanitarian law is territorial. So there is a gap between the legal system we have and the way in which the information paradigm has changed because of technology. And all that creates the kind of problem that we see now, where, as I said, information, which I've called it a survival right, is actually under threat at the very moment when people need it most.
Thank you very much, Irene, for an interesting description, of the conclusions of your report. I would like you to elaborate a little bit on where we go from here. What are the sort of one or two of the key recommendations to give us something to grasp on to go forward. Where do we go from
Well,
here?
my first recommendation has been to governments. I presented this report to the UN General Assembly last year, and my first recommendation is for governments to reaffirm the right to information, not as a weapon of war, not as a tool for disinformation, but actually as a human right, which
a right
is,
in itself.
and also a survival right, because people's lives, safety, livelihoods, state of mind depend on it. The second, of course, is that countering disinformation is important. Governments are taking action, but they should ground their action into human rights and respect human rights standards and use freedom of expression as the method, the strategy for countering disinformation. Because there should be diverse information, there should be trustworthy sources of information that governments should encourage, both by being open themselves, but also encouraging independent media, and by investing in digital literacy, digital information, media literacy. And at the end of the day, using national security laws, terrorism, anti-terrorism laws, censoring critical voices, that does nothing to counter disinformation. It actually drives disinformation underground and converts it into conspiracy theories and is actually damaging. Thirdly, companies have to do much more. Companies have to take responsibility, both during crisis and post-crisis. They have to be alert, they have to strengthen their crisis response, they have to invest more in content moderation, they have to invest in understanding local contexts and be consistent around the world. And finally, I would say we need to address these issues cross-border. So therefore, the global processes that are taking place in the UN, the Global Digital Compact that Cecilia mentioned, these are very important initiatives, but at the same time, they have to be multi-stakeholder. That is where civil society have to be let in, sit alongside companies, sit alongside states, and find solutions.
Thank you very much, and maybe also be a part of the follow-up to the Agenda 2030. One of the indicators on the Goal 16 touches on this. So there are many possibilities of following up on freedom of speech and access to information. So thank you very much, Irene. Now, following on to Tai Tai Ong, what would be your first comments on the panel from your perspective?
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the space to engage in the Stockholm Internet Forum, which is actually a very important platform for us to not only learn from others, but also highlight our situation as well. I'm actually supposed to be joined by my other 6 Myanmar colleagues, but unfortunately all have been denied visa, which is actually a shame. And I would like to, when this forum, particularly this theme, is very timely and critical for Myanmar context because from the past 5 years, we have experienced a genocide, a civil war, an election that leads to a military coup, and then revolution, and then just recently a Category 5 cyclone. So when we talk about crisis, conflict, and it's actually not stranger to Myanmar. So when the military coup happened in 2021, it was immediately followed by an internet shutdown on the very first day of the coup, and then followed by a digital coup that comes parallelly from the military coup as well. So the military junta knows very well that the revolution will be utilizing the internet as a tool. So internet shutdowns has been imposed in various ways, and I would like to highlight that from this month, up to 52 townships in Myanmar has already faced more than 500 days of internet shutdown. And the internet shutdown happened in places where mass violations of atrocities and killing of civilians are happening. So the internet shutdown is actually weaponized and utilized by the junta to, as a tool for them to oppress. And then another issue I would like to highlight is on surveillance. So when the coup started happening in the country, the military seems to have various tactics to actually try to crack down activists and people who are against them. But as time goes by, we can actually see that Myanmar is going forward to a surveillance state. There are new regulations, laws that being imposed. There are new technologies that being installed, and there are new kind of infrastructure-wise that the military has in control as well. And the last issue I would like to highlight is on the information operations that has been run in the country. So when we talk about information operations in Myanmar, one might thought that, one whole military is, behind the information operations, which is utilizing the, primarily the social media like Meta, Telegram, and so on and so forth. But actually, in the case of Myanmar, the information operations since is actually quite complex. They are, of course, the military, pro-military who are running it, and also we can also see new medias and also see a lot of new financially motivated actors that comes into play as well. So as Ms. Irene Khan has pointed out about disinformation in the country, it's very important that right now in countries like ours, the disinformation economy, which is fueled by, which is enabled by platforms which are actually overlooked, which is becoming a very critical problem for Myanmar as well. So yes, these are the 3 points that I would like to highlight, especially on the Myanmar situation, the digital coup on Myanmar. And yeah, I will be happy to answer any questions after that.
Thank you, Taito, for very interesting introductory remarks on a very difficult situation. I would just like to put one question to you now, and then we'll come back. And that is, how can you look upon the international frameworks? How can they be strengthened to support you in your specific situation in Myanmar?
So in the context of Myanmar, there are ways international communities can really help. So the one thing is we would like to convey the message of do not forget Myanmar, because Myanmar may not be in the news as before. Things are actually not becoming better. It is actually becoming worse. We have tens of thousands of people still in the jail, killed, abducted, and the situation is actually becoming much more worse. So I would like to convey the message of do not forget Myanmar, the solidarity, the support that we have from civil society organizations, activists, nation states through the whole coup has actually provided us with support, mental support to actually go forward. And then another one, particularly because we are here in Sweden, Stockholm, and Sweden this year is chairing the EU Parliament conversation. So I would also like to point out that regulations that are actually drafted, that are actually enacted in this part of the world have actually a very good spilling effect to our part of the world, although it may not seem like that. Like for instance, the Digital Service Act, which is holding tech companies accountable, is actually very useful to our part of the world. And then new services, new regulations that will come up, like the DMA, and then European code of practice around disinformation are actually very important tools for us to actually utilize to hold the tech companies accountable in our part of the world. So it is very hard for us who are not in the, yesterday one of our friends says the Brussels bubble, to be engaged in this kind of discussions. So I hope that we were given a chance to engage in the Brussels bubble more when they are talking about this kind of regulations. That will be a very, very valuable for us to be involved in as well.
Thank you, Tai, for reminding us. Thank you for giving that answer. And now I'll continue to you, Philip. What would be your introductory remarks? And then I'll put some questions to you. And we'll continue with a little bit of dialogue. I think we have actually time for that. So we'll have time for you to respond to each other a little bit.
Great, thank you, Karin.
Thank you.
I'm very honored, very pleased to be here, also speaking after such great co-panelist speeches. I might state the obvious to such an informal audience, but our message, the International Committee of the Red Cross, is digital technologies have an impact on people and humanitarian organizations in conflict. Digital threats have real-life consequences. And this is something we keep passing as a message. Last week, I was in New York during the Protection of Civilian Week, and this is a message I passed. Next week, a colleague of mine will be hosting a series of workshops and conferences in the Silicon Valley. We will pass the same messages to the tech companies who are developing these digital technologies. Few of my colleagues are doing the same right now in Khartoum, in Damascus, in Kinshasa, in Bogota, in Kabul. So this is something which is quite important because, as I said, it might be obvious to you, but for many people it is not. And what do we mean by impact of digital technologies on conflict? First, it comes on top of existing suffering, of the classic way of warfare is happening. And unlike many people thought that, I would say, cyber warfare will replace the classic warfare, no, it's come on top. So it's an additional suffering. We see a growing investment of armed forces in cyber technologies. It's billions. It's not just small, few people in cyber command or places like that. It's really millions or billions that are invested in autonomous weapon system, for example, in information warfare, in information operations. It is a growing concern, and we can see that states, governments are putting quite a lot of resources into that. We see also that technology has become a reason for conflict, similar to access to water or a question of territory. Technology might become also itself a topic for conflict. We also see a growing involvement of civilians in cyber warfare, what we call civilianization, which puts themselves at risk because first they don't understand and they don't know that they can become a target because they participate directly in the hostilities, but very often they don't understand the limits of international humanitarian law and they may target some of the civilian infrastructures by conducting cyber attacks. And the last point, which relates to the fact that a colleague of mine is in San Francisco, is the growing role of digital technology companies in cyber warfare, and I think Irene has already mentioned it. For humanitarian organization, it means also quite a lot that we need to catch up. It means understanding how misinformation, disinformation plays against us, how surveillance is becoming also a tool against humanitarian organization, and there is something we don't want to become as a humanitarian surveillance, kind of similar to capitalism, having us being the reason for people to be surveilled. Data protection, we see the growing use of AI and how we can make AI much more, ethical, responsible. There is a growing push from donors also to go for certain technologies that are not yet totally mastered, such as, for example, the use of biometrics for registering people. We have big tensions on our side with the use of the cloud because of different legislation and the fact that the data doesn't belong or doesn't stay in one specific legislation or one specific country. We see also a big tension of the fragmentation of internet, as we can see it, and as an organization that tries to work everywhere around the world, having operating systems that might not be allowed to be operated in other places around the world is putting again pressure on us. I will detail this a little bit if you don't mind. The Red Cross movement has few principles, the so-called fundamental principles, such as neutrality, impartiality, independence. And we can see that, for example, the sanctions that are imposed on certain countries by either governments or the tech companies themselves put our neutrality quite under pressure, because we cannot operate everywhere we want, the way we want. The same in terms of independence. The vendor lock-in, when we are working with a system which is so far the cheapest or the most, deployed around the world, we might face this problem of suddenly having price being increased, or the fact that we cannot operate with another system because there is this competition between the companies, and we might lose this capacity to be totally independent and work the way we want. Or the same way with impartiality, we see quite a lot of tension with AI because of the lack of transparency of these different the data sets, etc. And for example, we know very well that AI is biased and is a big threat to the fact that it doesn't represent the whole people, and the data sets that produce some intelligence are not so well made, so that we are leaving people on the side. So this is some of the elements we see when it concerns us. But the most worrying elements are really the impact of digital technologies on people themselves. We spoke a lot about the impact of disinformation and hate speech. I'm not going to go further into that. I will bring just one element after. But we see the lack of access to connectivity. But one big element for us is the lack of choices that often people have or don't have, in the sense that we have technologies that impose on them, and in a conflict settings, very often they don't have the choice to use certain tools, and this is to the detriment of their capacity to take an informed decision. We see also something which is a growing concern is the digital divide. The fact that we have people who are not connected and therefore themselves will not be entitled, or they are put on the side because they don't appear anymore in the statistics, or they can't get the cash by SMSs or etc. And this is something we are very worried about, that we have a growing gap between those who are already vulnerable, who become even more vulnerable because they can't have access to that. And there is a big discussions we had already yesterday during the PRESSIF meeting, which is the question of literacy. We expect people to know quite a lot, but if I take even myself, there is so much I don't know. So we can't expect people to know quite a lot, and there is a lot that needs to be given and taught to people of what are the risks they are taking, so that they can again take informed decisions.
Thank you, Philip. I would like you we'll give you an applause. Sorry. I just wanted to dive into the dialogue, and that would be, you, of course, work a lot with the international humanitarian law. In the current situation, do we have to revisit the IHL?
So it's often a question that people ask us, and there are many different initiatives, even from the private sector, coming with the Digital Geneva Convention, etc. For the International Committee of the Red Cross, it's quite clear. Existing rules applies. Do not target civilian infrastructure or humanitarian organization, even in a digital sphere. So don't target humanitarian data, for example. So the question of us being not only protected from a legal perspective with the data we collect, but also from a technical perspective. So for us, it's quite clear. There is tension. Irene mentioned the fact that the geography is putting a little bit of pressure on the fact that cyber attacks can be conducted from outside the territory. The time also is a bit another constraint when a conflict, according to international humanitarian law, is when the first shots are shot, or the first tank is crossing a border, whereas cyber attacks can happen way before and continue way after. So there is this need to reconcile this element, but for us, humanitarian law is very clear. It stays and it's still relevant today in a world that is much more digitalized.
It can be used also in this digitalized world, that is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Or it should be applied, rather, in this digitalized world, in every situation.
It must be applied.
It must be applied, exactly. Irene, it looks as if you want to comment a little bit
Yes.
on what Philippe said, but also maybe Tai, and then Tai.
Yeah, I wanted to
same
comment because
possibility for
I've
you.
been working closely over the last 2 years with ICRC looking at these issues of digital threats to civilians. And what I find is, on the one hand, the human rights system is very strong on a right to information and freedom of expression. On the other side, international humanitarian law is very strong on the protection of civilians, but not necessarily on protecting information. Journalists, for example, are civilians, like any other civilian, whereas we know from the human rights perspective that they are targeted civilians because of the work they do. And I think it's really time to see how we bring the two systems of law to apply together on the ground, because of technology, because of the way in which conflict and crisis are handled these days with information, because it's very hard, as you said, to know at what point the violence is coming to a situation where it becomes a conflict, and IHL will apply. And yet it's a state of emergency, so human rights is already under attack. So I think the communities, the humanitarian community, the human rights community, the digital rights community, need to come together to find how we can strengthen and reaffirm the principles. All the principles are valid, but they need to be brought together to close the holes.
Thank you. Tai, what are you thinking?
No, I think it's absolutely very important. Like, for instance, when we talk about the context of Myanmar, just recently the Category 5 cyclone hit the region of where the Rohingya camps, the Rohingya community, the Rakhine community are actually residing. And coincidentally, the cyclone was to hit the region where the internet shutdown is happening at the same time. And we were really terrified because without the internet, we actually couldn't find a way to inform the people of what's to come. And luckily, the cyclone had few casualties compared to the Nagis cyclone that we had a few years ago. But then after the cyclone, when we talk about humanitarian aid going to happen in these regions, the internet is actually very crucial, and we are actually hoping that groups like ICRC to call, for the reopening of services, because it's actually very crucial to actually help aftermath of the cyclone. And at the same time, we are also talking about, because all of these shutdowns happens in areas where civilians are actually killed by airstrike and atrocities. So we are also talking about the possibility of holding the military junta accountable by categorizing the internet shutdown as a war crime. So I think these two, humanitarian and human rights, particularly I'm using the case of internet shutdowns, are actually very important and mandatory.
Yeah.
Maybe
Continue,
as a reaction, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't want to.
No, continue.
Just very interesting the discussion. I think there is one element for me that is critical. Is very often people don't realize that this is a harm. I'm a bit obsessed by that, but I take ourselves as an example. As an organization, we were subject to disinformation in a context. It's only when it was leaked in the media that we realized that was a real operation against us. So you can imagine that for many people who are subject of these kind of, I would say, information operations, or who are facing digital threats, themselves are not really noticing it. And for us, this is creating I would say, a dead angle in the sense that we don't have enough evidences. And somehow it's also a call, and together with different organizations, we try to get and have research so that it shows the fact that digital risk have also, and I'm insisting with this sentence, real-life consequences. Because if we cannot prove it, we cannot demonstrate it, it's very difficult for states or for private companies to take decision, change norms, change regulations, because it's so, how to say, unreal. And unless you have faced a hack or you were surveilled, you don't understand it. So this is something where we need to get more evidences from the field, from people who can come back with the cases. The case of suddenly internet shutdown when there is a natural disaster, these are examples that we can bring to the higher level and to try to make a difference.
Thank you. Just one last comment, and maybe one last comment from each of you. But I'm standing here thinking that it's been going on for a couple of years now, a discussion around global public goods. And this is really a global public good that could be turned as, or is sometimes turned into a global public bad. Because it's put in the wrong hands or it's used in the wrong way. The techniques or the digitalization in different ways, internet as such. We're discussing global public goods at the World Bank spring meetings and the other multilateral banks spring meetings, at the UN in different ways. But it's normally solidly discussions around climate change, viruses, not internet viruses, but rather pandemics. COVID, etc. We rarely discuss this issue in those rooms. And we hardly ever discuss the connections between digital techniques, human rights, etc., in broader settings. How would we get there to a situation where people who work with the broader global public goods area also touches on this? My feeling is that there is a feel or a scare, or whatever word I would use, or a thought that this is around techniques, it's very difficult. It's around something that I don't understand. So we'll stick to pandemics, or we'll stick to climate. But we have to discuss all of it at the same time. That would be my first, maybe naive comment. The second would be that what is stuck in my head is when I listen, especially to you, Philip, is when I was in Satari refugee camp a couple of years ago and tried this, what's it called, when you use your eyes to identify yourself.
VR?
Exactly, not VR. No, yeah, maybe it's called VR, but you got people got the money into their cards by identifying.
Iris scan.
Eye scan, yeah. And I sort of, who protects the identities of these refugees or the migrants? They're really the most vulnerable people on the globe. Who protects the identities of these people? Because their identities are now up in the cloud somewhere. So it's sort of gotten from difficult to worse to very bad. Those were my reflections when listening to you. And now we have some minutes left, and maybe you can give us some hope for the last comments, and then we'll continue with the 2 days.
I think, Karin, in a way, you answered yourself there when you mentioned the pandemic. Imagine how we would have tackled the pandemic without digital technology, without having understanding of information, and how important information was in handling the pandemic itself. For people to receive the information, for governments to produce correct data and to share it. So I think that's one lesson. There's always a silver lining to the cloud, they say. But I think one lesson from the pandemic is coming, that I'm finding that development actors are now much more conscious about the importance of information and digital technology from that perspective. What's actually happening is that there's a two-track where some governments have introduced e-governance and so on, and they're moving very fast into it, looking at it as technology and not realizing that technology has to work for people. Yeah. And you're leaving people behind where people's literacy levels are not high enough, data protection systems are not in place, you don't trust your own government, why would you want to hand your data over to the government? And For example, with the ISCAN, the poor refugees don't even know what's happening.
They don't even have a choice.
They don't even have a choice. And I know this because I have been involved with the Rohingya refugees in the camps, where there was at one point, someone realized it, and there was almost a rebellion against UNHCR because they were afraid that that data would be handed over to the Myanmar authorities. So there is a lot there about people at the end that we have to remember, and that's where the human rights come in. And what scares me is that the way technology is moving forward with generative AI and so on, the human is being lost out of the rights. And that is where I think we really need to focus, because technology has to work for people, and that means it has to protect people at the end. It has to connect people in ways that enhance people's welfare and people's well-being and people's rights and lives and livelihoods. And if we talk about regulation, we are thinking about markets usually. I'm afraid even in the European Union, when the regulation is coming in, it's coming in from the perspective of managing markets. And we've got to think about rights. I think this is about as good a time that there ever has been, that those people who are working in the areas of technology, who are working in the areas of development, are beginning to understand how important information is, because information is a right, it's a human right. It's a public good, but public goods come and go depending on government policies. Rights are set out in international law and are binding on governments. So that's why I think the rights approach is the right one.
Thank you, Irene. Tai Tai.
Yes, right now, I mean, as as users of the internet, we have already gradually acknowledged that the access to the internet is no longer a luxury. It's more of like an essential services that electricity and water to us. So we actually acknowledge it. We have UN resolutions that acknowledge it, but I think that we should have a much more binding regulations that acknowledge that internet is an essential service. It's like electricity and water. So I think that's very important. And then right now, the line between physical, virtual is actually disappearing little by little, and we are actually having more, intersectionality around different issues. And I think that, the internet should be, treated as such as well.
Thank you. Philippe. Yeah.
Hope.
Hope.
I'm not so much in that domain, but I will try to be.
Yeah, you're in the
no,
ICRC.
sorry,
You've been doing a lot of good things over many years, giving hope to people.
I'm very impressed right now by the process of around the Global Digital Compact. I think, and there is a way to bring also to those who are in power and those who have the power, and here again, I mean also private companies, to be accountable for their act. And I think bringing the evidences, I already said it, but I will repeat it, bringing evidences, making them available is something that I think can make a big difference.
Thank you. So what we take with us from you is that there is knowledge, of course, on the panel and in the room. There is hope. There is, we have to always put rights and humanity at the center, as a frame, as a basis, as everything around when we talk about global public goods development and taking the challenges forward. Thank you to the panel, and we'll continue the discussions over the days.
Beautiful, beautiful morning. Stockholm is really welcoming everyone with its most fantastic weather. I am Anna-Karin Eneström, and I'm the permanent representative of Sweden to the United Nations in New York. And I'm appointed by the President of the General Assembly together with my Rwandan colleague, Claver Gatete, who unfortunately cannot be with us these days, but he has his fantastic, excellent colleague, Yannick Tona, here, and so I'm very glad that Yannick is here. And I'm also very glad that we have the UN Secretary General's special envoy on tech envoy, the USG Amandeep Gill with us also, and I know that you will appear on the scene tomorrow, Amandeep, and thank you again for working very closely with us as co-facilitators for the intergovernmental process that will lead up to the Global Digital Compact to be adopted by the heads of state and government at the Summit of the Future in September 2024. We are really here to listen to you. I know that you will have a lot of things to say that will be important for us in the process that we are embarking on right now. And we are very much in a consultative phase of that process. So very eager to listen to your voices on things to bring into the Global Digital Compact, challenges, risks, opportunities. As you might know, as I said, the Global Digital Compact is one of the key aspects in preparing the Summit of the Future for heads of state and government September next year. But it's also a real opportunity to shape a shared vision on how to work with the digital tools for the future. And that is very much in line with the UN 75 declarations that was adopted by the heads of state and government in 2020, and also the Secretary General's Our Common Agenda that was a continuation of an implementation of the UN 75 declaration. This is also a real multi-stakeholder process, and I want to underline that it is key that we work together with civil society, youth organizations, women organizations, and the private sector. And we are towards the end now of the informal consultation part of the process, and we have done that in the format of deep dives, 8 deep dives, and I know that many of you have been participating in these deep dives. We have tried to make them as inclusive, as transparent, and as meaningful as possible, and we are very happy to have had a wide range of participants from civil society, from youth organizations, minority communities, private sector, tech community, women's organizations, and we've had between 500 to 800 participants in each of the deep dives. Our challenge is, of course, to have enough time to listen to all voices, and we're trying to accommodate as much as we can as we go along in this process. We still have 2 deep dives to go, Global Digital Commons and accelerating the implementation of the SDG agenda. So 2 really key deep dives, and I'm really hoping that as many of you as possible will be able to participate in these 2 deep dives. The consultations have been very constructive and engaging, and I just for ease of reference will repeat the 8 areas that we have had the deep dives on. So digital inclusion and connectivity, internet governance, data protection, human rights online, digital trust and security, artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, global digital commons, and accelerating progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think just want to mention 3 things that has really been the conclusion of the consultations so far. The first one is that we really need to do much more to bridge the digital divide. We still have 2.7 billion people that have not access to internet. The second is that how unique this opportunity is to use the digital tools to accelerate implementation of the SDG agenda, SDG goals and the Agenda 2030. And as you know, there will be a summit taking place in New York to assess the implementation of the SDGs in September this year. And the third one is that the importance of that human rights apply offline as well as online. So after these deep dives in June, we will, the co-facilitators will elaborate what we have said, an issue paper, which is an assessment on where we are. Where is the convergence? Where do we need more discussions? And then we will have consultations during the fall, and we will start the real negotiations on the compact in the spring, leading up to the summit in September. And as you might know, the Secretary General will also present his vision for the Global Digital Compact on Monday, 5th June. So again, I want to conclude with saying that we would really like to talk with you, to listen to you, and to engage with you. And therefore, Yannick and myself will be outside this room, somewhere here in the right-hand corner, during the coffee break, which we have called Coffee with COFAX. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there and to be part of the discussions here as well. Thank you so much.